How we doing, everyone? Welcome to episode 3. This is All Blocks Covered, a podcast that talks about all the different facets of the NBA. I'm your host, Marcus. I got Chili Chill right next to me. Say what's up, Chili.
You heard me?
On this episode, it's all about the trade deadline that happened a week ago. And we're talking about all the players that were on the move and what that means for their respective teams, as well as the players that didn't move that were talked about a lot, what is going to happen with them and their respective teams. As well, it was buyout season. There was a couple guys that got bought out and that went to championship contending teams. What does that mean as well? But before we even get to any of the subjects today, again, we're going to keep with that linear progression in terms of learning more about us. And so it was recommended to us that we do NBA player comps.
Yes.
For our basketball game. And so we decided, hey, we'll do one or a couple for when we actually played organized basketball like a decade ago. And then we'll do one or a couple for our game, our pickup game, I guess, right now. So do you want to do the honors and go first?
Yeah, I'll start. So for the high school days back then, I actually have 3.
Whoa.
But the first one right off the back, the most obvious one to me would be my guy, Tasmanian from the Looney Tunes. Just because you came down the court so fast and just like spinning the whole time. So that's what comes up.
Fair.
Yeah.
Actually, did you see the Space Jam trailer?
Yes, I just watched it.
Okay, well, let's wait till after the player comes, but we need to have a conversation about the trailer, but keep going.
So my second one for high school days would be Rajon Rondo.
Ooh.
Just because the whole passing thing, and you never really looked to shoot. It was more assist, layup, open layup. And just like a special appearance one would be Andre Miller.
Oh, I didn't even think of that. Wow, okay. That makes a lot of more sense, but why?
Same thing, assist, but just the floor manager, and just super efficient too.
Chili was pretty much spot on right there. During my playing days, I was definitely a facilitator. Definitely controlled the offense. Didn't really look to shoot. More of a defender, rebounder, taller guard as well, but we were all kind of like the same height, so there wasn't really a big disparity right there. So that kind of makes sense. For me, I guess to counter that, the one guy that I think about during my playing days is actually Ben Simmons.
Okay.
Again, doesn't look to shoot, doesn't want to shoot, not a good shooter. Key defender for their team, obviously outside of Embiid. Good rebounder, the point guard, taller guard, all that jazz. No Jazz players. So now my comp for you.
Let me go high somewhere.
So I have 2 guys, both were and are Celtics. I'll do one. The first one was Al Horford.
Hey, countryman.
Very serviceable. Athletic, knows his role, maximizes his role. Not the greatest offensive player, but knows what he's doing on the offensive end, I should say. Now, my other one might be hella disrespectful.
Oh, shit.
Currently on the Celtics right now, and it is
no.
Grant Williams.
Oh, JV. No.
Again, same guy that plays a ton of minutes because he knows his role. Undersized big. Good rebounder, always does the right thing, just still kind of figuring out like how he can get more minutes and be more efficient on offense. True. I knew that was going to be hella disrespectful.
Well, it's funny because Crystal and I roast him all the time. Healthy roast. We call him JV because we think he plays for a junior varsity team. But
there was a tweet, and we talked about this before, about like Grant Williams. I don't know if this is, again, making fun of him, but he looks like the guy that played football in the fall semester and then came to basketball season a little late because the football team did really well.
So common.
All right, so I'll do my comp for you in terms of your playing days right now, or pickup days, I should say. And so the one guy that I think about right now is 90s Charles Barkley.
MVP.
MVP season, which I think he doesn't get a lot of respect for. I think a lot of people look at Charles Barkley like what he is today, and they think he just wasn't a good player. No, he was a Hall of Famer, Olympian, MVP for his team. But just like, again, undersized big, pretty much played guard, very physical, downhill player, can shoot from the outside as well, can kind of take over. So it's a complete kind of 180 from when you used to play till now. Definitely a way better offensive game, way better handles, way better shot right now. So Charles Barkley is my guy.
Thank you.
For you.
After mentioning Williams, Barkley kind of made me feel a little better. I forgot to say your playing days now, my comparation.
Oh, okay.
And for that, I've been going back and forward. But I think I would say Julius Randle. Just because he could drive it whenever he wants. He's so strong. And then he can shoot the mid-range and he can shoot the three, So, and he's a good defensive player, too.
You know what? When I was thinking about, like, even current players right now, I actually even thought about Julius Randle for yourself as well.
Really?
And we're both, like, right now, like, physical, I would say guards, I should say. Because if you compare us to, like, an NBA height, like, we're pretty much at that guard level, that 6 foot plus ish era right there. So I can see both of us sort of being in that sort of Julius Randle, but I completely agree with that. Let's get to the Space Jam trailer.
Yes.
Watched it once yesterday. A lot of things are happening in this trailer. And the one thing about, like, the first one with Michael Jordan, I feel like a lot of people get attached to it because, one, during that era, Michael Jordan was the biggest thing since sliced bread. And then as well as the Looney Tunes were, like, one of the biggest, like, cartoon shows in, like, ever. And so when you put those things together, like, a lot of kids that grew up in the 90s were very attached to it. Whether the movie was good or not, it is what it is. And now you bring out this trailer and this movie with LeBron James, who this generation sees LeBron as the GOAT, kind of thing. So when you first saw the trailer, or even when you first thought of or heard the idea of them making this, what did you think?
I thought it was a great idea for the culture. Just like you said, Michael Jordan had his first Space Jam, and that was really good. And LeBron being talked about being the GOAT, following Michael Jordan's footsteps. It's kind of nice to see him taking that torch as well.
True. So let's talk about this trailer, because, again, there's a lot of things kind of going on. Your first reaction when you actually saw the trailer?
I was like, look at all these characters. I mean, I saw the Iron Giant. I saw King Kong, which is trending right now because of Kong versus Godzilla or whatever, which I want to watch. But, that's exciting, and obviously the graphics look way better than the first movie. So
I don't remember any of these characters outside of the Looney Tunes ones, but it's like I don't remember any of these characters being in the first one. So they're trying to make a statement, what looks like, and obviously trying to bring more excitement and more nostalgia, I guess. And I don't know if this is something that's going to be foreshadowing to maybe more other movies that they're trying to do. Who really knows? I was kind of looking for the 4 other players that were going to be in it, and it was Dame, AD, Diana Taurasi, and Klay Thompson. And when I first saw the trailer, I was like, okay, so where are they? I had to go on Twitter for someone to really, like, spell it out for me of just like who is who.
In Twitter we trust.
In NBA Twitter we definitely trust. And Dame's character looks more like Russell Westbrook to me for some reason.
You know what I saw on Twitter? They were saying that he looked like that high school kid Newman because he was dribbling all over the place. I thought that was funny.
True. AD, I can see the whole unibrow thing with him. The one thing that was interesting that someone had to explain to me on Twitter was Diana Taurasi. And you actually have to look back, but she's actually a white snake because Kobe gave her the nickname White Mamba.
Oh, that's awesome.
So
I'll have to rewatch it because I didn't see her. The most noticeable one to me was Klay Thompson and Dame.
Yeah, especially Klay. Just a lot of people were like, that's Game 6 Klay right there because of the fire.
I miss Klay. We all miss Klay.
True. Wait for him to come back and see what the Warriors are like with him. But overall, a lot going on. There probably might be one or two more trailers. Excited for this to happen. I'm sure there's going to be plenty of debates about this for no reason. It's just a movie, but it's LeBron, MJ. You never really know.
Who did it better?
Actually, when it first came out that they were going to make this, my surprise, hidden gem is that for some reason at the end of the movie, Michael Jordan's going to be it. Somehow he's just going to make an appearance and it's going to throw everyone else off and it's going to be...
Well, that would be really cool.
That actually would be. Where they both team up and then whatever, beat them on stars or whatever. But again, one more thing that we're going to actually do before we actually get to our main segment, and we're going to start trying this out every other episode or maybe every 4 episodes, is we're actually going to do a quick rapid fire game. 1 minute on the clock. I wrote down 20 to 25 random words or random names, basketball related, not basketball related. And Chili is going to use that 1 minute. Surprise. Every time I say a word, it's his first reaction of once he hears this. And again, it's very sporadic, very random. And so we're trying this out. Hopefully it doesn't go off the rails. If it does, it brings great content for this podcast. So here is our rapid fire. All right, so here we go. And we are going to put 1 minute on the clock. And again, I hope this doesn't go off the rails, but we'll see. Here we go. And 3, 2, 1. Here we go. First one, cheese pizza.
Trash.
Paul Pierce.
Next.
Pick up basketball.
Every day.
Dame time.
Half court.
NBA Twitter.
Go.
The city of Orlando.
Fun.
Donuts.
Casually.
JV.
For life.
Binge watch.
Weekends.
King James.
Really good.
Gonzaga.
Miracle shot.
All blocks covered.
That's us.
Flop.
James.
Cheap NBA tickets.
Every day.
Iowa.
Cold.
Kobe.
Superhero.
Perfect. Right on the money.
Let's get it.
I was worried.
Bro, you caught me off guard with Paul Pierce.
I knew I would.
You said Paul Pierce, and you know how I feel about Paul and his takes. Well, that came to mind, but also his IG Live came to mind, and it all played in my head, and I lost it. The turkeys.
I don't even know what to say about that IG Live. There was a lot happening there.
I think we should watch it at some point. I need to watch the whole thing, so I'm going to look that up.
Get some context and some content for us, maybe for another episode. But let's tap into segment 1.
Let's get it.
All right, so let's talk about what happened at the trade deadline. And so what we decided to do is, instead of going by team, we decided to go trade by trade, the bigger trades. But we really decided to detail what actually happened throughout that day. And so a lot of the talk going into it was, where's Kyle Lowry going to go? He was probably the biggest name that was talked about the weeks leading up to it, as well as Lonzo Ball had 10 to 15 teams that he was kind of attached to because it seems like everyone needs a point guard. And maybe the Pelicans were kind of hot and cold with Lonzo, as well as Harrison Barnes. He was attached to the Celtics. Was that actually going to happen? But to start off with the day, it was kind of a smaller trade. And the first one was JaVale McGee going back to the Denver Nuggets. And so when I mean by him going back, he got acquired by the Denver Nuggets in 2012. He was there for about 3 to 4 years and then ended up going somewhere else. But during that time, he was always on the wrong end of the highlight. And so he was a consistent member on Shaqtin' a Fool. And then out of the whim throughout his time, ended up being a real serviceable big for championship teams with the Golden State Warriors and with the Lakers. So I asked you, Chili, what did he mean for the Lakers specifically last year in their championship run that maybe you can kind of see that he can kind of bring with Denver?
So JaVale McGee, first ballot, Shaqtin' a Fool, Hall of Fame. No, I'm playing. But I really liked when they bring him up. I think he's really a fun player. But when he was with LA, he really brought size and defense. It didn't work against the Rockets. They benched him and Dwight Howard. But for the other series, he was a key part of that. Same with the Golden State Warriors.
Exactly. How I look at this for Denver is a low risk, like moderate reward move. So it's not anything that's going to like move the needle for them. But what you said about like him on the defensive end, the Nuggets are not one of the top teams in terms of defense. That's actually one of the things that they really struggle with. So with him possibly just coming off the bench, he can provide that rim protection for them. He's a great rebounder. He's not necessarily going to bring you a ton of offense, but with the lobs, that could be interesting with Murray and Campazzo, who's one of my guys, that can kind of lob it to him. But it's a simple fit, nothing too drastic or crazy. But again, it's depth for them, and it's dependable depth. And it's, again, with the defense that he brings, that could be something maybe really small when it comes to the playoff time. Now, here's the monster sort of trade that happened. What we talked about last episode was the Magic going to take a risk and actually make a big move? They have never really done this in their past, specifically the last decade, where something monster to kind of transition their team into like a new direction or a new vision. And we talked about Aaron Gordon, Evan Fournier, and maybe even a Terrence Ross where they can kind of ship off and then kind of start over. We didn't talk about Nikola Vucevic. Everything that was been told through social media or through the news was it had to be a monster trade or we're not getting rid of Vucevic. Like, we're keeping our two-time All-Star. But right after the JaVale McGee news, we got the Woj bomb that said him, Nikola Vucevic, Al Farouq-Aminu was being traded to Chicago for Wendell Carter Jr., Otto Porter Jr., and every sort of junior, and 2 first-round picks, 2021 and 2023. When I first saw this kind of threw me out of the loop. When you first saw this, what did you sort of think?
I was not expecting the Magic to part ways with Vooch. I thought he was going to spend the rest of his career with the Magic. I even thought the Magic was going to retire, put his jersey up in the rafters.
Rapture, Vucevic.
Yeah. So, and then how much he means to the community here in Orlando. We're so attached to him. So that was shocking.
Very, very shocking. I remember the first tweet when I first saw it was like, what? Like, what is this? And the Chicago Bulls of all team, I thought if he was going to get traded, it would be to like either a championship contending team or a team that was kind of like in the thick of things towards getting to like one of those top teams, maybe the Celtics. That was sort of linked. But he goes to the Chicago Bulls, and now for the Chicago Bulls, it tells me that they're trying to go with veteran and experience, and they're not doing the whole young guys into the developing anymore, or that's not going to be a big priority. Now, reminder for the Chicago Bulls, they've got a new front office regime. They've got a new coach in Billy D. You know I'm biased towards him because he was a former Gator, but they've got a whole new thing going on. They're in the race for the play-in right now. You add in Vucevic, that can be sort of exciting for them. Now, on the flip side, for the Magic, they get those 2 first-round picks, which is a 2021 and a 2023 top 4 protected. And that means that when it comes down to the lottery, if the Chicago Bulls get in the top 4, they get that pick. If they're outside of the top 4, that means it goes to the Orlando Magic, which I've already mentioned that the Chicago Bulls are in the play-in race, and they, with Vucevic, they might actually get into be like a top 6 seed. Who knows? But it looks like they're probably going to be outside that top 4. The Magic are not good right now, and when we talk a little bit more about the Magic, you'll understand why they're probably going to be one of the last place teams. in the Eastern Conference, so they're probably going to get a top 4. So it's going to be, I guess the positive with this is the fact that they could get 2 really decent sort of picks in the first round with this year and maybe even in 2023. But they also get Wendell Carter Jr., a promising young big. What are you seeing out of Wendell Carter Jr. that could be promising for the Magic?
I see a lot of potential in Wendell, especially from his early days. He's played with other talented guys growing up. And even on fantasy, he's got good numbers, man. And I think with him and Markelle Fultz, that's going to be a nice 2-guy combo right there in the future.
Well, the one interesting thing about Wendell Carter Jr. is that he was picked 1 pick behind Mo Bamba. So back in, I believe that was 2017, when they were working out draftees, they could have went with Wendell Carter Jr., but they decided to go with Mo Bamba.
They should have.
Yeah, well, now they get both of them, which somehow worked into their Magic. But the biggest question with this, with Wendell Carter Jr. and the Magic is he going to be part of their long-term vision? Is he going to be part of their development? Because on the trajectory of what they're saying is they want to rebuild, they want to go young. You've got a Mo Bamba, you got a Wendell Carter Jr., you've got a whole bunch of young guys, and now you're going to get draft picks. Is he going to be part of the future for them? With Otto Porter Jr., I think this is kind of like a one-season wonder sort of deal where maybe in the offseason he's with another team. But the most important thing is the draft picks and Wendell Carter Jr. coming. Now, moving on with the Magic still. So again, they did this big risk of getting rid of their 2-time All-Star. Now you start thinking, okay, now are they going with a full rebuild? And we saw that with the next trade with Evan Fournier. He ended up getting traded to the Boston Celtics. And the Magic get Jeff Teague, who ended up getting waived, which, yeah, we'll leave it at that. And 2 future second-round picks. Now, for the Celtics, they were linked to Harrison Barnes maybe and Aaron Gordon. They needed that combo forward to kind of bring in the substance that Gordon Hayward brought, which at that time you were just like, hey, we don't want Gordon Hayward anymore. It was kind of a mutual agreement. But now looking back, you're just like, okay, maybe we really needed that combo forward. You bring in Evan Fournier. I'm not necessarily sure that even really helps them, but where are you with Evan Fournier, just even with his time with the Magic and now with the Celtics?
Yeah, with the Magic, I thought he should have came off the bench. I don't think he is a go-to guy. I think he could be a really good role player. We'll see how he does in Boston, but yeah, I'm glad he's gone.
I think this is, I didn't really understand the move for the Celtics, but maybe this was like their last resort where nothing was sort of clicking in terms of getting other people. So they decided, hey, the Magic are trying to get rid of a 6'7" Evan Fournier. Well, I guess we'll take him. It's another shooting guard for us. But they lack bench depth. They lack bigs, like quality bigs for them. And we'll talk about why that's the case. But for the Magic, this is just another sign of just like, hey, we're rebuilding. Like we're making moves right now. Like we're the team that everyone is sort of looking at of just like, hey, what pieces can we get from us? And then for the for the Magic, again, it's more future draft picks. Like you're already rebuilding at this point, so might as well just keep going young. Now, I did mention that they need bigs for the Celtics, and the reason for that is because they actually got rid of Daniel Tice, which is unfortunate because the last moment for Daniel Tice was a missed 3 at the buzzer against the Bucks. So that's unfortunate for him. His last memory,
sour.
Very, very sour. But I'm pretty sure that had nothing to do with it. But who knows? You never know. But that takes money off the books, and he's going to the Bulls, which again adds to the story that the Bulls don't. And not saying that they don't care about the young guys, but it's giving me signs that they're going experienced veterans, and in the offseason, they might be someone to look at for possible free agency moves in terms of trying to get, I don't know, another all-star or getting really good role players. But like these are the sort of first steps for them. Now, let's get back to the Magic. At this point, this is the Orlando Magic podcast.
Crap. Bring the Papa John.
We're trapped. Yeah, no pops because they keep losing. Aaron Gordon. At this point, Vucevic is gone. Fournier is gone. You're almost assuming right now that Aaron Gordon is probably gone. And you know what? The early portion of that Thursday, we found out that Aaron Gordon was actually on the move. He ended up getting traded to the Denver Nuggets with Gary Clark, and the Magic get Gary Harris, RJ Hampton, and future first-round picks. Now, Chili talked about this on the last episode about like how Gordon was demanding a trade. And so he also talked about like how player empowerment is so big right now in the NBA. So you almost kind of assumed that if nothing happened with the Magic, he'd be the one guy that was on the move. But where were you with Aaron Gordon, with the Magic? And again, does he bring anything necessarily like his sort of talent to Denver? Does that necessarily help them or propel them?
Well, same with Fournier. I thought Gordon's time in Orlando was overdue. I thought it was time for him to go. Not like this or anything. He was fun to watch, a high flyer, a dunk contest staple. But, you know, he wanted a new scenery. He wanted to get out. And it's actually a good match with Denver. I think he brings what Jeremy Grant used to bring to that team, which is athleticism and defense and excitement. So watch out for the Denver Nuggets. I think with Gordon, they're going to switch their season around a little bit more and make a run for it.
They're the one team that's I'm excited about to see with Aaron Gordon. And you talked about like he could be the missing piece with it in terms of like what they lost from Jeremy Grant and just like his overall size. But Denver doesn't need him to shoot outside shots or bring any sort of creativity on offense. They need him to just play defense on like the main forwards and wings of other teams because they just didn't have that.
I feel like all he has to do is play defense and cut to the basket. And they're going to find with Jokic. I mean, he's going to find him every time.
When you have Jokic, who's in the MVP conversation, Murray, who has that potential to get back to Bubble Murray in that leg up package, and then you have Michael Porter Jr., who they're still trying to figure out, but he has so much potential. His ceiling is just so high. And then you add in Aaron Gordon, who continues to just have flashes. Like, this is going to be one of those exciting teams where it's like, okay, we've got 4 guys that can kind of produce for us. Does that get us over the hump? Does that get us into maybe the top 3 or 4 seeds? With the Lakers dwindling without AD and LeBron, the Clippers are still a little shaky, and Utah and Phoenix are still up there. Portland's sort of getting its way back in there, but can Denver get back into that conversation, into that top 4 or 5 seeds? That's something that we need to look at. Now, this was the last move for Orlando. Overall, with these 3 trades, where are you at right now with the Orlando Magic?
I'm still excited for them just because they have Fultz and they have Wendell Carter Jr. I think them being young, it's going to be a promising future.
For Magic fans, it's another rebuild, you know? And it would be nice to kind of hear from Orlando Magic fans right now because I feel like this is kind of a different rebuild. I think over the last decade, the post-Dwight era, it was kind of a lacking vision. And I know there's a new front office right now, but I think it was a lot of just picking draftees, not really knowing how they sort of fit with this team. Then you get into the last 2 years where they made the playoffs. You have Steve Clifford, who's a really good coach, I think. He's a really good defensive coach, and he brings a lot of toughness towards this team. But I think this is a little bit different rebuild now. You got the future seconds. You got the future first. You got in what Chile said about the Wendell Carter Jr. You've got Fultz. You've got Isaac. If they can play Bamba. RJ Hampton is promising, who comes from Denver. I don't see Gary Harris staying with the Orlando Magic. I think it's just like, hey, just these last 2 months, and then they're going to find him to go to a championship contending team. But if you can land really good picks in this 2021 draft, which is a really good draft, this can be exciting for the Magic. And I know for Magic fans, it's tough because it's another rebuild. But for us, like, I would say trust it.
Yeah, I'm still excited. I mean, they'll have hopefully we'll still have the cheap tickets and we'll be able to make it and see the development of the young stars.
Yeah, and hopefully they can win one so we can get some pizza.
Shout out to Papa John's.
Just like our first couple episodes, we would like to introduce a short indent that you will hear normally after the first portion of each episode. This is what we've been calling our Community Assist Minute. During this brief time, we will highlight an NBA player, WNBA player, a team, or the NBA or WNBA as a whole that showcases something positive that they've done off the court that truly makes a difference in other people's lives. So with that, let's introduce you to our Community Assist Minute. This episode's Community Assist Minute is dedicated to Patty Mills of the San Antonio Spurs. This past February, Indigenous Basketball Australia, which was founded by Mills to provide pathways for Aboriginal Australians to play basketball, tipped off the first ever Indigenous Community Basketball League for players aged 14 and under in 8 locations across Australia. The tournament, which preserve and celebrate Indigenous cultural practices, focus on basketball development and life skills education, including mental and physical well-being, as well as strengthening individual identity as a critical age. Additionally, Mills partnered with the NBA and Junior NBA to announce the National Indigenous Basketball Tournament at the Gold Coast and Queensland from April 11th through the 13th, which will provide additional on- and off-court development opportunities for 48 boys and girls. Mills has dedicated much of his professional playing career in the United States to giving back to Australia, with a particular focus on empowering Indigenous young people and communities of color. In 2020, he donated the remainder of his 2019-20 season salary to social justice organizations and helped launch the We Got You campaign in collaboration with other high-profile Australian athletes dedicated to eliminating racism, exclusion, and discrimination in sports. Mills also organized a $750,000 donation from 9 Australian NBA players in the wake of the devastating Australian bushfires earlier in the year. Basketball as a sport has brought me happiness, joy, education, and a real sense of purpose, said Mills. However, not everyone has had the same opportunities as I have, which is why I'm dedicated to using my platform, my profile, and my voice to develop innovative programs like IBA, which will allow my people to really own their story. Mills was recognized this past month as a winner of the NBA's own Community Award in recognition of his continued efforts to create opportunities that empower Indigenous young people and advance social justice in his native Australia. The NBA will donate $10,000 on Mills' behalf to the Indigenous Basketball Australia. And this has been your Community Assist Minute. So on this Thursday, it seemed like during the midday there was like a small break. It got quiet, maybe a little too quiet. It seemed like all these reporters went out to lunch and all these teams went out to lunch. We're just like, is this it? And then it sort of ramped up in the last like hour and a half, 2 hours, where it got a little hectic. And so we'll start with this. The next kind of big trade that sort of happened was Norman Powell of the Toronto Raptors ended up getting traded to the Blazers for Gary Trent Jr. and Rodney Hood, which I even remember tweeted like, excuse me, like what is this? You've got 2 shooting guards that sort of play the same sort of role. I think Norman Powell is maybe like a little bit better. He started getting into the starting lineup for Toronto and started like really producing. But you have a up and coming Gary Trent who has shown so much potential for the Blazers. This sort of move kind of didn't make sense for me. What about you?
At first glance, it didn't make sense because, like you said, they're pretty similar. But it seems like Portland wants to win right now, make a run. And with Powell, I think he's a little bit more developed than Gary. So that lets me know that, and with CJ McCollum kind of being hurt, I know he's back now. But they just want somebody reliable that they can count on for the playoff run. With Gary in Toronto, I think Toronto in the future, they're going to have to rebuild again. And he's young, he's efficient, and it seems like that he would be a good fit for Toronto. And it's funny because his dad went through the same situation where he got traded from the Blazers to the Raptors. So that's kind of cool.
Truth. And I think Nurkic is back for the Blazers, so they can sort of...
Big Nurk!
They can sort of make a run. The interesting about these two is that Powell has a player option at the end of the season, and Gary Trent is going to be a free agent. So both can probably not be on their respective teams. So that's why it was like a head scratcher for me, because again, same sort of player, probably won't even be on either teams at the end of the season, depending on their respective teams. But again, neither one of them could be pretty much on their team. Norman Powell's the better player. I think the Blazers are really, like you said, trying to make that playoff push, doing whatever it takes right now. Again, knowing the Lakers are kind of slipping away. They see Denver. They made a move. You've got Phoenix and Utah already there. You've got Dame, who's in the MVP conversation right now. They needed to make maybe that 1% move that can really help them. Everyone's coming back. Could this be the right move for them? Who knows? That's something that we're going to have to see. The next trade that happened right after, and like, again, it got really hectic and like things were kind of jumping out of the woodwork, is JJ Redick actually leaving the Pelicans. And there was a lot of talk within the last like month about like him trying to get back to the Brooklyn area, the Northeast area, because that's where his family's from, and the whole COVID sort of situation. He's with New Orleans. He didn't get to see his family and all that. He thought the season would start in January, ended up starting in December. That's a whole nother story. But he ended up going to the Dallas Mavericks, even further away from his family that's in New York. And so I ended up actually listening to his podcast, and he was pretty mad about it, as he probably should be. And he actually brought up the notion about like how I wonder if players were going to trust the front office, specifically David Griffin, in terms of how they treat their players and in terms of making guarantees that doesn't necessarily come into fruition. So he's, I guess, happy to be with the Mavs. He said if it was any other year, he would be more than willing to like extend and be with the team. But just like, it's kind of interesting that, again, all that was talked about was him going to a Northeastern team and then ends up going to Dallas. I think this does sort of help Dallas a little bit. Doesn't actually put them in like the true contending sort of situation, but they get another shooter. You know, they get another reliable guy where they've been missing Seth Curry, who's in Philly right now. But who really knows? But let's move on to like an even bigger one. And that was Lou Will of the Clippers going to Atlanta for Rajon Rondo. Talk to me about this one, because this one's off for me.
So you talking about my guy, Lou Will? Lemon Pepper Lou Will?
Lemon Pepper Lou.
6-man Lou Will? 2 girls and they get along like I'm Lou Will?
Oh.
Lou Will going back home. It's pretty cool. I don't think he was expecting it. He was a little mad. Goes to show you that, you know, the franchise can trade you whenever they want. Or if you're a player, you know, the player empowerment, you can push for a trade. But it's nice to see him in Atlanta. I think Atlanta is making all the right moves to make a run for it. I know they just got Rondo, but it seemed like Rondo wasn't even on the floor that much. So bring in a shooter. Lou Will should be on the floor more often and should give them guaranteed buckets because he's a walking bucket, and it should be a good fit.
Right off the bat, I'm just saying the Hawks won this portion of it. I'm just saying that right off the bat, like things could be different these next couple months, but just based on what you said, just like I think the Hawks just won this sort of trade. I'm just saying that. I'm bold. This is the hot take or whatever. When I look at the Clippers, we talked about like they needed a point guard. And on that list was Kyle Lowry, possibly. I don't know. How are they going to pull that off? And then, again, Lonzo Ball was on that short list. Did not have Rajon Rondo at all on that list. Didn't even think about Rajon Rondo. I didn't see any sort of piece or news about Rajon Rondo. So this kind of like threw me out of the loop. Playoff Rondo is a thing. You saw that with your team, the Lakers. Hitting outside shots out of the whim. Like, what is this? Didn't see this in the regular season.
So playoff Rondo is the thing, but the Clippers curse is also a thing.
Facts.
So I'm a little worried.
What are you going to get out of Rondo in the regular season? Who knows? Chemistry is a big thing for the Clippers. We saw that last year. But what he does provide is the length, the IQ, a little bit of the defense, but also his personality and his leadership. Are those the sort of intangible things that's going to help the Clippers get over the hump? Or that's where we're going to have to wait for the playoffs?
And to be honest, I get it. You know, you want a leader. You want somebody to get in your face. But I don't think that Kawhi and Paul George necessarily appreciate someone in their faces. I could see them kind of shying away from that and saying, you know, F this and getting a little bit discouraged. So we'll see how that works out.
For Lemon Pepper Lou, for the Hawks, I think this is the one reason why I think this is a winner for the Hawks is because, again, what Chile said, 6th man of the year multiple times, candidate almost all the time, essentially, just produces so much just off the bench in terms of his playmaking and his shooting. And Atlanta already has so much depth. They're winning right now with Nate McMillan. Now you're adding Lou Williams, who brings in that experience and bring in those sort of talents that I just said. Like, this is just a win-win for them. And if it doesn't work out, again, they already have the depth, and they're going with their young guys in terms of their vision moving forward with Trae Young, Horter, Hunter, Reddish, and Collins. Like, they've got their young guys already set.
And worst case scenario, it might not work out for the team, but it's definitely going to work out for the streets. And I know the economy is going to be booming again thanks to Lou Will. He's going to put the money where it belongs.
It seems like the revenue at Magic City might go up just a tad, I will say.
I agree.
Okay, so really quick with this small one, George Hill is going to the 76ers, which I'm actually happy for George Hill because he was stuck in this OKC sort of, we're not sure if we're tanking, we're a bad team, but we're actually still winning. So this is kind of an odd sort of thing because he's an experienced guard. And Philly was another team that was looking for a point guard, like a true point guard. Kyle Lowry going back home to Philly.
Thickums.
More Thickums. Now you don't have to trade away for Philly. You don't have to trade away a ton of pieces. You get George Hill, experience, played in the playoffs, can come off the bench, a reliable guy. So that's good for them. And then with this trade, Austin Rivers was a part of it, and now he went to the Thunder. But I knew when I saw that report that he was going to the Thunder, he was like, nope, peace, deuces. Like, I'm not going to OKC, which he didn't get bought out, but he got waived, which is unfortunate. But for him, he'll probably go to a championship contending team, I think. He brings so much value. Unfortunately, he didn't get enough playing time with the Knicks because Derrick Rose got there and they got quickly.
He was getting hot right before Derrick arrived.
He was. He did that special game where I think he went like 7 for 7 or whatever to like close out the fourth quarter. And then when Rose came, it was just like, well, I'm at the end of the bench. This is unfortunate. But I've heard the Bucks might be giving him a call. Who knows? But I see him going to a championship contending team. I think he can still be serviceable. Here's the big one. Our boy, Victor Oladipo.
Home Depot
is heading to South Beach.
Let's go. I love it.
This has been in the works for probably a couple of years, I'd say. Easily a couple of years, just like kind of talked about, kind of loud about it, kind of not loud about it. I remember in the offseason he was like, oh, I want to stay with the Pacers. But like a week before, he was telling people like, hey, I'm looking at other places, specifically Miami and all that jazz. No Jazz players. So he ends up actually going to South Beach. And we talked about this last episode about like, hey, would it be the trade deadline? Whether it be in the offseason, he's definitely not staying with Houston. He's going to go someplace. And his number one place was Miami. I don't know how Miami pulled this off. Pat Riley is just like executive of the generation because him getting Shaq, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, Jimmy Butler, and now he's getting Victor Oladipo. And he's not getting rid of any of his what I call cute assets. He didn't. Tyler Hero is still on the team. Duncan Robinson is still on the team. In this trade, they got rid of Kelly Olynyk, Avery Bradley, and a 2022 draft pick swap. Are you kidding me, Houston? What is going on?
Houston, we've been having a problem.
Consistently having a problem. And I'm wondering with the Harden deal and the Victor Oladipo deal, like, what are they getting out of this? Like, Houston is one of those teams where, kind of like the Pacers, where they've never really been bad. They've never been like really good, but they've never been like real trash. Like they've always been like that middle of the pack team or even relevant. Sort of contending. Yeah, relevant. That's a good word for it. Now it's a complete rebuild. Like this is almost even worse than the Magic maybe.
It's worse because on paper, I still think they have a better team than the Magic.
Fair.
And it seems like I wouldn't be surprised if the Magic had a better record than them at the end of the season. Which is sad. That
is sad. I think for Houston, they're going to need to pray that they get Cade Cunningham as the number one pick.
Why is the Magic sort of like
the standard? Why can't we just say like the Kings or something, or which we shouldn't probably be trashing just random teams, but still, it seems like I think it's fair for us because we're Orlando residents and we've seen the mismanagement over the last decade, or I should say post Dwight.
And although the Magic is not our team, we still root for them, and we won the we won the 50% off Papa John's, and we won the cheap tickets to the game. So
Pops. No, but for Miami, this is a win-win for them. Like, to be able to get rid of a couple guys. Avery Bradley wasn't really a big impact. Kelly Olynyk played enough minutes, but they have Bam Adebayo.
And both of them have had injuries this year.
Exactly. You bring in Oladipo, who we both kind of agree that he's not necessarily the same player than the 2018 where he was most improved and third team All NBA. He's not necessarily that guy. But do they need him to be?
Well, I don't know, but you can kind of tell he's been through some things this past couple of years. I mean, I know with injury and probably other personal things. I mean, a lot of things have happened with the pandemic and Black Lives Matters and all that stuff. But I don't think they need him to be what he was. But you could tell he's been through pain, and you can tell that he's just going to come out and prove himself and give it all he's got. And that's really the Miami culture from what I can see. They just go out there and they demand the best out of each other's, and then they push each other. So I think it's a good fit.
I think the injuries could probably take a toll on him. And again, he was looking for that right fit. The Pacers wasn't that fit. Houston wasn't that fit. And now he's in the spot that he really wants. Does this sort of rejuvenate essentially his career and kind of take off? Because he's in the fit that he wants, and he's in the fit that Miami wants from him. You know, and everyone knew that once he got to Miami, like, this is it. This is the one spot. You know, they just need him to really just be that lockdown defender. And he fits all the criteria for the Miami's culture, like in their system. You know, that grit and grind, that toughness, you know, to get after it. Exactly what Jimmy Butler brings, and he's sort of instilling with the other players. Adding Oladipo, I guess this question for you. Adding Oladipo, do they end up contending for some of those championship spots with like the Bucks, Philly, or Brooklyn? Do you see them actually getting into that conversation adding Oladipo?
Well, I'm not sure how they're going to pan out, but I will say that I would love to see the Nets square off against the Heat, whatever round. I think whoever wins out of those two teams is going to make it to the finals.
I can definitely see that. I also feel that like whoever Miami plays in a playoff series, it's probably going to go to 7 because they're just not going to let down. You know, they're going to press, and make it difficult for whoever they play.
And also with Oladipo, I noticed last year Jimmy Butler played so much, and he was so exhausted, and he was playing through injuries. And with Home Depot, he's kind of similar game or at least position, so some of that load can go off to Oladipo.
I would like to see just the tenacity between Butler and Oladipo like on the court together, just like completely getting after it. Like that could just be a sight to see if you're like big into defense in that regard. But that's what we're going to see from these teams and the players that got traded. But really quick, we got to the very end, and Kyle Lowry's name that was talked about all day during that day and the weeks kind of leading up, more thickums. Where are you at with Kyle Lowry? He's 35. He's going to be a free agent at the end of the season. He's probably either going to stay with Toronto or go somewhere else. Where are you with Kyle Lowry?
Well, you would think that the Raptors will either give him an extension or trade him, you know, but Kyle Lowry has done so much for that organization that the vibe that I get is, hey, you can do whatever you want. You know, we're not going to be mad at it. So, you know, if you want to leave next year, you leave. If you want to try to resign for less or whatever the case may be, you know, we're here for you. But I don't think he's going to be pushed to make a decision.
I don't know. This is probably a conversation for another time. But do you think, I guess it's a two-parter. Do you think he's the Raptors' all-time player? And 2, do you think he gets a statue?
First thought would be no and no. Although I think he means a lot to the city. That championship, to be honest, to be real honest, that was all Kawhi Leonard. And the statue, I mean, it could happen, but I don't really see it. I think there's be more iconic Raptors players that are probably not going to get a statue, so I wouldn't give it to him just yet.
That's a good conversation to ask like a Toronto Raptor fan, like what they actually think about Lowry, because he's been there a long time, especially with the DeRozan, and now he's having with Kawhi, and now he's having his own moment. But curious to see from their perspective what they actually sort of think about who he is as a player and what they mean for Toronto. I think for Toronto, they have to look in the mirror and be like, what's our vision? Because again, like I said, Kyle Lowry, 35, he means a lot to the team, but just like, do they need to go in a different direction? Do they need to start going with the Siakams, the Fred VanVleets, OG Ananobis? Like, do they go that route or try to find other different stars or through the draft and just say, Kyle Lowry, like you said, you meant so much to us. We're going to help you out. Like, you go to a failure, you go to the team that you sort of won, and we go to a different direction. As well as Masai Ujiri, is he going to be back next year? He's been kind of... He's not implying, but some of the tones in terms of like when he talks is just like, hey, I might be here, I might not be here.
Toronto gonna be all right.
Exactly. So
with me or without me,
who knows?
Gonna be all right.
You know, but the interesting about Toronto right now is that they're fighting to get back into that playoff spot, and I mean they've been having to fight adversity in terms of going through the bubble, coming back to Toronto, realizing that they're not going to be in Toronto. They're going to be playing in Tampa, an hour from us. You know?
I mean, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but I think that's kind of an upgrade.
Yeah, I mean,
especially during the winter. But I'm sure Canada is a beautiful country.
But I mean, and then the no taxes here. So, but just they've been through a lot. They started off rough. Then they started like getting on their run, but now they're still trying to figure their things out. But when they get in the offseason, they need to start looking in the mirror and just be like, what is our next direction? We had a really good run these last couple of years. Who knows? Now for Lonzo Ball, his name didn't get moved, which again, he was talked about with many different teams. Were you with Lonzo Ball? Do you still see him still a good fit with New Orleans, or do you think it's just his time to just get that bag and go somewhere else?
So with Lonzo, I don't want to say he's hit his peak, but I just don't see him getting like a huge contract or anything of the sort. I see him as a role player now, and I think he's gonna thrive in any team he's on because he's young. And he's a pass-first guy. His shot's getting better. He's really athletic. But to be honest, I don't even think about Lonzo anymore. Like, whenever I hear Ball, all I can think about is LaMelo. Like, that's all I want to talk about. That's all I care about nowadays. So, Lonzo, good luck. But, your brother's up next.
Ooh. I don't know if that's like a hot take or shade right there, but no, we're LaMelo Ball fans right here. But for Lonzo Ball, he did really good. I remember, again, a month ago or a month and a half ago, like his name was in the trade talks, and then all of a sudden he started playing really well. And so, like, I guess they decided within that time frame, like, hey, we still need him. But New Orleans is like still fighting to get back into the play-in, which is, I don't know how that's the thing when you have Zion, Lonzo, Bledsoe.
Which is Zion hurt? I think he might be right now.
Well, he has like a sprained thumb, and I think it was like out for like one game. But he's actually been dominating just recently. But when you have Zion, like I said, when you have Zion, Ingram, and all these sort of players, and you're still fighting to get in there, if they don't make the playoffs, this offseason is going to be very interesting involving Lonzo Ball in terms of, is Lonzo Ball thinking like, hey, I'm going to go somewhere else because I don't know what this franchise is doing and I don't know the direction, and maybe the direction for the Pelicans could be completely different with not even wanting Lonzo. So that's going to be interesting to see. And the last one was Harrison Barnes. Like, he was linked to the Celtics for this entire time, and he didn't end up getting moved. We already talked about the Celtics wanting a combo guard. They didn't get Gordon. They didn't get Harrison Barnes. They got Evan Fournier, but with Harrison Barnes, he's still with the Kings, still doing it up.
And real quick with Harrison Barnes, last episode, I had said that he's from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, because I lived in Iowa for 6 years, and I thought I knew it all.
A fact check right there.
All about the Corn State, but actually he's from Ames, Iowa. So big shout out to Iowa State. Big shout out to THT and all the Iowa State alumni. straight hoopers.
All your Iowa people are coming after you.
Don't really know if I can say the same about the Hawkeyes, but
Ooh, a little shade right there. So after the trade deadline brings us to buyout season. And so there's a couple guys that went to championship contending teams. We'll start with the first guy with LaMarcus Aldridge. He got bought out by my San Antonio Spurs, which it was a good run, in San Antonio, but I think it was time for both parties to mutually part ways. But he ended up being talked about it with a lot of championship contending teams, the Nets, the Heat, the Lakers. Where was he going to go? Where was he going to be a good fit? And he ended up with the Brooklyn Nets. So the Brooklyn Nets now have the 3 superstars. They got Blake Griffin that we talked about last episode, and now they have LaMarcus Aldridge. Where do you see with LaMarcus Aldridge with the Nets? Does that do anything that does push them even more to a championship or bust? Like, what is this for LaMarcus Aldridge and the Nets?
Yeah, LaMarcus is a solid player, seasoned veteran. He should deliver for them. He should be consistent. I can see him averaging, like 15 and 8 boards, something like that. That could be enough for them to win a championship, I think. So it's a good fit.
I actually see him getting more minutes than DeAndre Jordan. I think in the long run, because he is an experienced veteran and somewhat of an all-star, really. Like, Nash is going to go with LaMarcus Aldridge when it comes playoff time and closing numbers, because what he can produce offensively, defensively is going to be an issue in terms of like switching and rebounding. But I don't think it even just puts him over the hump, because I'm still in the notion that once you have KD, Harden, and Kyrie, that's even enough right there to put you in the finals. I just feel like with LaMarcus Aldridge and Blake Griffin, it's just the name recognition. It's not necessarily like, hey, now they're the favorites to win. I thought they were the favorites even before those guys, or at least like in the championship hunt, so it doesn't necessarily change my notion of like what I feel about the Nets. But again, when it goes to NBA Twitter and how people view, they see LaMarcus Aldridge and they see Blake Griffin, it's like, oh my God, I've got everyone,
Not fair, man. Not fair.
This is the Avengers. Like, oh my God. Like, but.
Well, like I previously said, though, with Blake, I don't want to say he's washed, but he's not the same player he was. I think LaMarcus is going to be a little more consistent than him, and they do need that big presence down low, something that they didn't have. They do have the young Claxton.
Yes.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
And he's promising, but they need a seasoned vet.
Absolutely. And my only thing with the Nets is just like, I just want to see KD coming back, because again, there's a lot of question marks with KD and like when he's coming back. It could be tomorrow, it could be next week. They're kind of just fumbling in terms of when that exact date is. And I always talk about chemistry with teams. The Clippers had this issue last year. I just want to see this all put together, what that actually looks like, as well as going against good teams.
And I can see the Nets making a run without KD, and even making it to the Eastern Conference Finals without him, just because they still have Kyrie and Harden and the supporting cast. But to win a championship, they need KD, I think.
Facts. And then the next guy is Andre Drummond, and he's going to your Laker team.
Drummond.
How do you feel about this?
At first, I was really excited. I've always been a fan of Drummond, double guy, 20-point, 20-rebound guy. But down low and in the paint, he hasn't been that consistent, surprisingly, because he's such a big guy, but he can't seem to finish every time. It was disappointing to see him get hurt right away. His toe, I'm not really familiar with the injury, but I was watching the game and he started complaining about his toe, something about his toenail. So that was discouraging, but we'll see what happens. I know now they don't have Drummond, AD, and LeBron, so.
I think he had to switch like his shoes multiple times in the game, probably because of that injury. I don't really know, but for the short term, I don't necessarily see it being a big deal getting him, because I think right now they just need offense. Like, they just need a ton of offense with not having AD and LeBron there. So that really goes with the role players in Kuzma, Caruso, Schroeder, even Harrell as well. Like, they just need pure offense right now. But like in the playoff time, the defense that he provides. Again, I don't know why it's an issue for him in terms of interior scoring, like right by the basket. Like, I'm not understanding why that's like an issue for him. But again, the defense and the rim protection, that's something that's going to be interesting. Can he play the 5, like a true 5 for them, as well as AD at the 4? If he can't, it's still not necessarily a big deal because we've seen AD play the 5 and Morris go to the 4, and that's probably a better offensive lineup as well as when you go against teams that are like smaller. But we'll see how Frank Vogel kind of like depicts the lineups, I should say, with Andre Drummond. But it's nice to have when you have an experienced guy like that and he can do a lot. So, and then one more guy that it's not official, but it has been talked about is Boogie Cousins. He's possibly going to the Clippers. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, it seems like Boogie's goal in life is to play for all the California teams. I'm not playing. But, to be honest, I feel sad for Boogie. I'm a fan. I've always liked DeMarcus Cousins. I like the big man that can dominate, that can shoot. And it seems like he could have been the best player on a championship team, when he was in his prime. So it's been sad seeing him bounce from team to team, just like Isaiah Thomas, just due to injuries. But I just hope he can find his forever home.
It's just so unfortunate that even just like in a couple year span, he went from like one of the best centers in the NBA to like literally just trying to find a team that really wants him. Fortunate for him, he's been over these last couple of years been on like really good teams for just a short amount of time. But again, the injuries start piling up, and how front offices even like look at him in terms of how can we utilize a Boogie Cousins. The Clippers are trying to bring him in. Hopefully, like, hey, can it just be a big that can shoot from the outside? Can you get rebounds? Can you switch properly? Kind of thing. It's going to be an evaluation for them, but they also have Serge Ibaka. So it's not necessarily like, hey, if Boogie Cousins doesn't work out, we still have other guys. So, and Zubats. So,
I'll take Zubats over Ibaka.
Same. All right. So as we close, just like the first 2 episodes, we are doing what we call a parting shot. It is a last message that we wanted to get out to our audience. It could be serious. It could be funny. It could be sports related. It could be not. And so the last 2 were pretty long. The last one was pretty informational. This one's really quick. And the thing that we wanted to say is really just appreciate your small dubs and understanding what those W's are. Like in terms of the normal day-to-day things that you have, whether it's getting 8 hours of sleep or meeting new people or staying on your routine. Like those can be just like the small W's in your life that can kind of propel you over the massive L's that you might have taken either the day before or during that day. So that's really just like the big thing that we just wanted to share because, again, you can get overwhelmed by those massive L's where it kind of just bleeds into you and you don't really know what to do with your next step. But again, just understanding the small W's that you have in your life and make those big. And if you can understand those, then you can probably get through your day in a more positive outlook towards it. But that's our parting shot for today. And that was our episode for today. Thank you so much, guys, for listening. We really appreciate it. Hope you guys really enjoyed this episode. Feel free to rate, review, and subscribe. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Podcast ABC. That is Podcast ABC. Chili, you have anything?
No, stay safe, everyone, and take care of your Mentos and chickens.
And we will see you next week. This is All Blocks Covered, guys. Peace.